Today, we will talk about XLM and especially their involvement with Circle and USDC, and include some current event commentary related to Ripple on the topic as well. And once again, pretty much everything I talk about comes down to I still think that there are some planned interconnections in between what Stellar is concentrating on and what Ripple is concentrating on. The topic is about Circle launching a new payments network which aims to compete with Visa and MasterCard. And that is called the Circle Payments Network, which is concentrating on USDC and EURC in order to provide 24/7 real-time settlement. And it appears as if they're not just concentrating on stablecoins anymore. They are essentially turning into a Web3 and blockchain payment processor. And I have thought for a while now that USDC could quite possibly end up as a de facto digital dollar or a de facto or a quasi CBDC, which I'm not happy about. However, I think that is how it will ultimately end up. The real connection here that I will concentrate on for the majority is the involvement of Stellar. This new payment network came with a cross-chain transfer protocol upgrade, which is still revolving around Ethereum. However, there are intentions to incorporate it with Stellar as well.
When will get CCTP on Stellar?
Yeah, it's a great question. We have been working very closely with Circle as incredibly strategic partners, as many of you know, for many years. And CCTP we recognize is just a very, very important capability to enable on the network. And we have been working with Circle, particularly as they've rolled out CCTP V2, which is importantly much more scalable and easier to support across the network. And with that, we do have agreement tacitly to move forward and actually enable this in year, which is a very exciting opportunity and growth strategy for us. One additional thing that I think is really valuable to note is that one of the things we've talked with Circle a lot about is the idea that the velocity of USDC moving on the Stellar network is incredibly, incredibly high. And so I think this has been an area of really important and valuable collaboration, knowing that when we think about stablecoins and what it means to have them on the network, it's not just about the amount that is on there, but actually the usability. And I think this is going to be a really exciting addition to the Stellar network.
We will talk more about that here in a little bit, but I want to get into the ties into Ripple, XRP, and RL USD2. So as a part of the marketing around this payment network, they are essentially advertising it as the first cross-border real-time payment system. And that is in part because they were able to translate USD into BRL, which I believe is in Brazil, which has a lot of ties into Ripple and Stellar, as I have talked about, in just 72 seconds end to end. And that seemed to catch some heat because that is the same kind of result and the same kind of marketing and the same kind of explanation that Ripple's platform talks about and has had. Here is the page on Ripple's website, and it essentially talks about the same things that the Circle Payment Network is rolling out right now. I have opinions on this, but I don't really want to get into that end of things in this one. There's a lot of talk about Ripple possibly acquiring Circle, and they are competing with Coinbase. And I seem to be having a little technical issue. Hold on.
For sale or not for sale? That is the question.
Okay, well, that was odd, but to cut the cheesy, horrible acting, I've got some creative things that I am still trying to get 100% done, but that is a little spoiler, and I think there are some pretty entertaining possibilities out of that. Now, On to this possible purchase. I don't really know if that is actually true. There have been a lot of comments by Circle saying how it's not, and yet it still is a huge thing online and on X and in a couple of news outlets, and that is the main topic of a different piece of content. However, the point here is that Ripple was trying to create a payment network that revolved around XRP in order to use the XRP asset as a bridge in between currencies. Well, over the last couple of years, stablecoins are seeming to be the preferred methods for a payment network and just transactions overall. And now these two are in direct competition because RLUSD and Ripple's platform are essentially trying to accomplish the exact same thing. And I don't have any issues with competition. In fact, I think it helps. But it seems like there has been much more traction and much more momentum for companies like Circle and Stellar in terms of real world integration that actually turns into application. So a lot of why people are saying that, well, this isn't a new thing, Ripple has had this, goes back to the comment around 72 seconds. And the single XRPL transaction only takes a few seconds. However, the entire process of converting fiat into an asset, if it is RLUSD or if it's XRP, and then transferring that and then converting it into a different fiat takes around 1 to 3 minutes on average. So the XRP army is essentially saying that it exists and why have anything else because everything will end up on the XRPL. And we have a little bit more of a explanation here. It's the payment system that takes 1 to 3 minutes overall, which includes all of those steps. So a lot of people were trying to say that the Circle payment network was not even as fast because it took 72 seconds instead of only 3. However, that's not comparing apples and apples. So I would say that Circle is competing with Ripple on this, and I think that's fine. I don't think it means that they will win out and they'll be the only one. It could end up like that, but I don't think that that would ever actually happen in a healthy economy. But if you look at the MTLs that Circle has acquired, they currently have 48 here in the US. And I believe that Ripple is close to that. I haven't seen that pop up in a long time. I know that X Money as of April was actually at 41, and with all of the ties into Stellar there, I think it's an interesting overlap of information. Here is the guy from Easy A who has really talked about Ripple a whole lot. And I think a lot of his posts are a little bit one-sided, but hey, he has his own thing and that's okay with me. But his point here is that Circle IPO is really important. So I will expand on this, but they are a company that essentially is able to earn a yield off of the fiat reserves by converting it into bonds and stuff. So the more that they have in fiat to create USDC, the more that they are able to actually earn. That does make it a little bit sensitive to the economic environment and especially interest rates. And I have seen that they pay like 50% to Coinbase. I'm not positive on that yet, but that would cut into their total profit, not their revenue. Having a lot of profit isn't insanely important if you structure your revenue related typical payments correctly. But that is a conversation in and of itself, and I only have any idea of that at all because I do have to talk about taxes a lot in real life. So yes, an IPO could be really big for them, and off of the profit, their valuation might not end up as high as it has in the past or as high as they would want right now. Off of the amount of revenue, it could be extremely high. But if it ends up as a public company, then your profits end up in your distributions. And so it really is all about the corporate profit. So I didn't mean to expand on that, but the point is that a Ripple or Coinbase acquisition might actually pay off even if they are set to expand tons and tons and tons. Now we will really talk about Stellar and Circle. USDC has been on Stellar since early 2021. They also have EURC on there, and then it has all of the typical Stellar stats and access to over 9,000 assets on the DEX itself. And there is a lot of involvement if you add in MoneyGram as well, which goes right back into a topic that I have spoken on a lot, which is the involvement in the Ukrainian humanitarian aid, which then turned into a CBDC pilot and then turned into the currently online transparent network that is run on Stellar in the country. So I have even more to explain on that whole topic, but not right now. So a lot of people are just not aware of Stellar, and oftentimes the interconnections aren't as obvious as they are with a really popular thing related to Sol or XRP. I actually just talked about this company last week, Web3 Enabler. And they are working with Circle primarily around cross functionality in Salesforce. And if you look at what the CCTP is all about, and you compare that to what Web3 Enabler is creating in Salesforce, they are talking about the same passkeys and specifically call out Stellar, USDC programmable wallets, and increasing the UI ease of use. And they specifically call out Circle wallets. And they are called out on Circle's site. So here we get a little technical, which is where I start to have issues because I am an engineer, but I am not good at IT and coding and computers and stuff. But I understand enough in order to be kind of annoying. So, in my opinion, stablecoins will run on Rust-based validators. And that just so happens to be the programming language of the Soroban smart contracts on Stellar. I honestly don't know what the Stellar network itself is actually created on, but there are a few other Rust protocols out there too. The Casper smart contracting is, I think Solana has actually moved that way or have some kind of functionality for that. And I want to say that there's one more off the top of my head, but I just can't remember it. So I'll just concentrate on Stellar. So here's a little bit more on the whole Rust related topic that also ties back into X Money, Stellar, and Elon. So Elon Musk changed his name recently to Gorkwan Rust, which he can do whatever he wants, right? Which is, in my opinion, probably some kind of a weird way to talk about the Rust programming language, which is what Soroban is on. Then you get into Stripe, which goes right back into X Money, the PayPal Mafia as well. They are incorporating USDC, which is available on Stellar. And I've been talking a lot about X Money, and there are a ton of Stellar connections there too. Here are at least a portion of the current partners with the Circle payment network right now. And if you compare this to the Stellar Anchor network, which is essentially the on-off ramps, then from what I was easily able to find, Alfred and Zodia Markets were actually on there. And this one typically has more hype around XRP, but there are a ton of connections into XLM. And here's that page. You got Alfred here, and then you've got, no, I think it was a yellow card actually. Yeah, it's that one, not Zodia. But I got distracted by that because there are a lot of Stellar connections into that company too. There is also copper, which is a really big thing that I haven't really talked about a lot before, except in my APFII content that again went back to the connection with the UN and Stellar, but they are partnered with Circle as well. And if you look at some of the more institutional service providers on Stellar, you've got Copper called out here along with Zodia Custody, and probably even more significantly, the DTCC and Hyperledger. The DTCC purchased a company called Currency, which was actually created on top of Stellar, and then it got renamed into DTCC Digital Assets. Now I want to just kind of skim through the Circle site. It is essentially completely changed to talk exclusively about the payments network. It's about USDC, EURC, and a tokenized money market fund, USYC, which is a US denomination but not currently acceptable here, which is always interesting to me. It talks about minting off of fiat, CCTP contracts, and again, wallets. Here is the white paper, and I typically don't spend a lot of time on these because it's a combination of extremely vague statements that are pretty marketing oriented, along with technical things that are not really my specialty. So it's actually more of an explanatory one, blah, blah, blah. It has a lot of pretty pictures, but I really think that one of the main applications of this, which Stellar has a lot of experience with, is institutional payments and the tokenization of things like bonds. A little bit more on CCTP. It is available on AVAX, Base, and Ethereum. More coming for whatever this is, Arbitrum and Sol. You've got cross-chain USDC in seconds, enhanced composability for post-transfer actions, one-to-one burn and mint. It does not have any LPs, and it is secured by Circle. Here is the web developer information from Circle. Lots of stuff that I really don't understand, and I don't really want to, honestly. And here is the page on CCTP itself, which links you to a white paper, but it shows that in between V1 and V2, you got a lot more speed and you got some more programmable specifications and actions. And it says more chains to be announced. I would think that is Stellar. Here is the white paper, which is a very technical one, and I would have to ask AI on tons of stuff in order to help me understand a whole lot. So for anyone who is interested in that stuff, it is all online.